Dear Diary, today's entry is a special one, for we're about to embark on a cinematic adventure into the number 18 film on the 50 best rom-coms list, Bridget Jones's Diary. That's right, Dear Diary, we're about to unravel the humorous and heartwarming tale of Bridget's journey through love, self-discovery, and the occasional mishap. I'm welcoming in returning guest Ann Schafer to help me pen this entry. How are you doing, Ann?
I'm doing so good, and I'm so excited to talk about this movie today.
Yeah, so how cheesy was that intro?
No, I loved it. Listen, I love a Dear Diary. I love it. Just really brings back a lot of nostalgia. So
okay, it's just one of those things. It's like, I mean, how can you, it's just there for me to take, you know? So
yeah,
I had to go with it.
I love it.
Yeah. So the first time you were on, you were lovely to come on last minute to talk about Barbie. And so I know you very much like that film. So I have to ask you, how do you feel like, do you feel like it was snubbed at the Oscars? I know it won for Best Original Song, but what's your feeling about that?
Yeah. So I have a lot of feelings about it. Like, I don't necessarily know if it was snubbed, because I saw all the performances that won like the big acting categories. I didn't watch everyone for the Oscars, but like I watched Poor Things and I watched Killers of the Flower Moon. Like, I saw all these things. Like, do I think there should have been nominations for more nominations? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did I really think that? I also thought that Barbie was going to win set design or costumes, like one of the two, and got snubbed for that as well. I just thought, for being such a like a monumental movie, I think it more than the awards allowed it to kind of show.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I feel like it's very much like the movie itself, though. Like Oscar night, it still somehow won the Oscars that night, with
Oh my gosh, see, I'm Just Ken was probably the best part of any Oscars ever. Like, it was just so fun and enjoyable, and I think that's what like the core of Barbie was. You know what I mean? It's just like a really enjoyable movie in time. So
yeah. Did you happen to catch Ryan Gosling's hosting gig on Saturday Night Live from this past weekend?
I have seen clips. I haven't watched the whole thing yet. Mostly because people kept sending me the Taylor's version of like his All Too Well, but for Ryan Gosling and Ken and all that. I was like, this is brilliant. I love it. So I've seen those pieces. I've seen a couple clips. I love when he breaks character. I think he's just the best.
Yeah. The intro it is quite funny, I thought, and just it's him having to sign off from Barbie. I thought it was
right.
very funny. So. Well, focusing on this film, I'm excited to talk to you about it because we haven't at all. So I'm interested in your thoughts. So let's go into this world of charming, awkward encounters and a pretty memorable love triangle.
Your mother's trying to fix you up with some divorcee.
Do you remember Bridget? She used to run around your lawn with no clothes on, remember?
That was the moment I decided to take control of my life. Resolution number 1, lose 20 pounds. Number 2,
Drink less.
very bad start to the year. Will persevere with resolution to find a nice, sensible man.
How about a drink at my place? Totally innocent, no funny business, just full sex.
Bridget Jones's Diary is a 2001 romantic comedy film directed by Sharon Maguire and written by Richard Curtis, Andrew Davies, and Helen Fielding, a co-production of the United Kingdom, United States, and France. It is based on Fielding's 1996 novel of the same name, which is a reinterpretation of Jane Austen's 1813 novel Pride and Prejudice. The adaptation stars Renee Zellweger as Bridget Jones, a 32-year-old British single woman who writes a diary that focuses on the things she wishes to happen in her life. However, her life changes when two men vie for her affection, portrayed by Colin Firth and Hugh Grant. Jim Broadbent and Gemma Jones appear in supporting roles. Bridget Jones's Diary premiered on April 13, 2001, and grossed over $280 million worldwide and received positive reviews, with critics highlighting Zellweger's titular performance, which garnered her a nomination for the Academy Award for Best Actress. So I have to stop there for a second. I did not remember that was the case. Like, did you know that she was nominated for this role?
I was looking at that earlier because I saw there was a lot of like pushback because she wasn't British and like everything about the thing is that she's British. But I had no idea that she was nominated for this. Like that's wild to think, because I think when we think of common like current day rom-coms, like they aren't typically nominated, like like people in those aren't nominated, and so I think that's maybe very 2001. So
yeah. So yeah, I'm sure we'll hit on that a little bit, but yeah, over the years, this has been held as part of the English pop culture, with Bridget Jones being cited as a British cultural icon, which is kind of played in part of its success because it was popular in the US and the UK. So the success of the film spawned a Bridget Jones franchise with 2 equally successful sequels being released: Bridget Jones, The Edge of Reason, and then Bridget Jones's Baby. And then I texted you the other day because it was announced that it's going to basically be a 4th installment of this franchise that's set to film in May. And so, okay, so with that setup there, like when I asked you to do this movie, I had no idea if you had a connection to this movie or anything. So do you?
What's really funny is like I remember us talking about this, like, oh, what movie should we do for this? And I was like, oh, Bridget Jones' Diary is such a good one. Like, I haven't seen it in a while. I want to watch this. And I turned it on and I was like, 32-year-old single woman who goes home on the holidays to, like, her parents are trying to set her up, blah, blah, blah. And I am a 32-year-old single woman who every time I go home for the holidays, my mom is like, oh, this person's single. And it's somebody who I like knew from high school, or somebody that she like works with. And it's like some random person. And so I think I had like maybe just forgotten that, like, I think when I had originally watched it, like I was like, oh, 32 is so old. And now I am 32. And I was like, oh, this is actually super relatable. So, well, unfortunately, but like the timing just worked out.
Yeah, well, it is kind of funny sometimes how some of these movies, not even meaning so, like when people like have signed up for them or whatever. But yeah, that is funny because when this movie started and stuff like that, I was like, oh, like, not that I think of you as Bridget Jones, but like
I mean, it's not a bad thing, right?
no, yeah, not at all. So so do you remember when you first saw this movie?
I want to say it was high school. So, if it came out in 2001, I would have been 10 when it came out. So maybe not. I don't think I would have watched it then, or maybe I
thought about that. I was like, she was probably too young when this was.
Yeah, I was like, I would have been 10. But I think that I remember, like, I used to watch rom-coms all the time with my girlfriends in high school and in college too. Like my roommate and I would just like pop in a DVD and like play whatever. So I think it's been since either high school or college, so over 10, 15 years ago since I've actually like watched it all the way through. And so it was nice to kind of have like a rewatch, because I feel like I don't see it commonly, like even when it's like on TV, how like movies just kind of play. I feel like I haven't even caught it on TV in the last 10 or so years.
Yeah. So have you seen any of the sequels before?
I want to say that I have. I know that I have. I've definitely seen the second one. I've definitely seen Edge of Reason. Okay. It's been a minute since I've seen it because I feel like the love triangle comes back, but like I couldn't tell you any specific details. And I know the 2016 like third installment had Patrick Dempsey in it, but I don't think I ever saw that. Okay. I don't remember ever seeing that. So I have no idea what actually happens next. So I'm gonna have to like catch up before the fourth one comes out, but I'm willing to do it. You know what I mean? I just kind of forgot that these movies really existed.
Yeah, we can go into it a little later. I haven't seen the sequels, and I will say that watching this movie, I kind of understand why I was never urged myself to watch the sequels. So right. I enjoy this movie. I think it's a good movie. I think there's like some high spots. And actually, I think it's wrong to say low spots. I just think that there's just kind of some like, I don't know. There's just some flatness there for me. But I do remember, so I was in college when it came out. So I almost feel like I saw this in the theater because we did go to the movies. I still remember that with a Baylor ID, you could go to the movies for $5. It didn't matter like what time or anything like that. So we went to the movies actually quite a bit. And so I feel like that's when because I had definitely seen this movie. It had been a while. So it was, I think, a big thing for me. I think when watching it, and I kind of had to keep it in perspective, I feel like when this movie came out, that Bridget Jones, and not so much Renee Zellweger's performance, but the character. I don't think we had seen many characters like her in a rom-com before. I think we were probably, especially going through this rom-com list, Meg Ryan comes to mind as far as like, I think those are the typical type of females that we would normally see. And so I think the fact that Bridget Jones is, a little bit, doesn't have a filter, unapologetically drinks and smokes, and it's kind of out there. I think it was kind of revolutionary, might be a little strong of a word, but I think it's not. I do think this movie paved the way for a lot of things. Like I would say even like a comedy like Bridesmaids now or something like that. So I think I had to kind of keep that in mind a little bit, because if you were seeing this movie for the first time, I don't think her character would be as quite of a revelation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that definitely the drinking and the smoking and the kind of like, all the things that really kind of push the envelope of like, not you're like, oh, like typical leading lady who's like struggling with like her store is going under, but like she's very much like independent, and she like is from the beginning, and like yes, she kind of has these like fall in love moments, as we'll talk about, but like truly like one of the more independent, like not looking for love, like very much that. And also just kind of, I think her like vibe and her energy just feels very different than your typical like, like damsel in distress kind of person that we see in typical rom-coms, especially around that time.
Yeah, because I would say Bridget Jones is she's definitely looking for love, but I feel like she's not trying to find a guy to basically what I'm trying to say here. She's not trying to find a guy to complete her personality, to fill a void there. She's just looking for a relationship. And so I think that stands out as well. She's kind of set with like who she is as a person. And so that's one thing I like about her.
Yeah, very much. I know that, like, obviously in the movie, she tries to go through like a little bit of a transformation and like some silly things of like, I think they also like bring up weight a lot. And I'm like, girl, like that time they were like, oh, she's 132 pounds. It must be so big. I'm like, are you kidding? Like, that's like, it was wild to me. But like, I mean, it's also a sign of the times, right? Like, and so kind of like her improvement of making herself better was kind of like a post, like really again, like not needing that for validation or not doing it for a man, but really just like, oh, this is what I'm going to do for as I'm growing, and then maybe something else will come from it.
Yeah, this Love Actually came out around this time as well, like 2003, and that movie was also penned by Richard Curtis. And so in that movie, famously, like Hugh Grant's love interest in that one, they talk about her weight and stuff, and you like watch it and you're like, what are you all talking about?
Beauty standards back then were so bad. I'm like, are you kidding me? These are like conventionally attractive and thin people that people are like, oh, I thought you said she was thin. And I'm like, no, what? She is.
Yeah. So that is definitely an aspect that kind of stands out a little bit. But so do you kind of mentioned a little bit, and I wondered a little bit, because Renee Zellweger is famously from Texas, and I do think it's not uncommon to find many British actors who like are American characters. Like, I mean, I can't tell you how many things we've like watched a whole like TV series before, and then you hear like a post interview and you're like, what in the world? They're British, and so this was a little unusual, especially as a movie that's very, very British, to bring in an American actress to do this. And so I was a little curious. Like, I didn't do too much digging, but basically, like, do British people feel like she basically pulled off the accent and the character, but if the nomination is any indication of how people felt, like I felt like if I did a Google search, I feel like if people have slammed it a whole lot, like I would have gotten a lot of results that popped up, and I didn't really. So I guess she pulled it off. I'm not an expert in such things.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I did take a dialect class in college and stuff like that, and so I think it's interesting because you're right. In current like kind of TVs and movies, we see a lot of the reverse. We see a lot of British or Australian
Hmm.
actors speaking in American accents, and it's like kind of fun to watch. And we don't like necessarily see it as much on the other end. But I think that a lot of people there was a little bit of outrage when she was cast that she was going to be like an American person, and there's already that tension. Like that reverse doesn't typically happen, but she like worked with a coach. Apparently, she also like didn't like leave the accent in between takes and stuff. So the entire time that they were filming, she remained in the British accent. And so yeah, people kind of were like, oh, okay. And I was like, I think Hugh Grant like even stood up for her and was like, no, this is like proper like British accent, like she's doing well. And so people kind of backed off a little bit, and clearly from the nomination she really got a lot of accolades from it. So seems like she worked with coaches to like have that dialect. I mean, it's things that anybody can learn. That's what actors do today. And so
Yeah.
I just think that the British feel very particular maybe about their accents, and Americans messing it up.
Yeah, yeah. So I have generally always kind of liked Renee Zellweger. I probably wouldn't put her like on a list of like my favorite actresses ever, but like I'm hard pressed to think of something I haven't enjoyed her in before or whatever. So yeah, I liked her in this movie, and I feel like she embodies the character really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I always get her and Naomi Watts confused a little bit
Oh,
sometimes.
I
Like
can
I
see
don't know,
that.
they
Yeah,
kind of like give me the same energy. I don't know why, but yeah, I've always really liked Renee Zellweger. I think that she's great. I mean, like she's in Chicago and like all
yeah.
these like great kind of talent. And she's kind of like I would say an underrated actress. Like I feel like we haven't seen a lot of her recently. But like definitely at that time she was on top of all the things that she was doing and in a lot of stuff. And did well in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there's enough of a age difference between us. I mean, I definitely remember the Renee Zellweger like wave. You mentioned
Yeah.
Chicago, but Jerry Maguire, where kind of put her
Oh
on the
yeah.
map and that sort of thing. She also, I don't know, did you ever see Cold Mountain? Um,
I
but
didn't know.
but I feel like she was nominated for that role. So I mean, there was definitely like this moment of of time where she was like super super popular. I never saw Judy, which I believe
Mm.
won for Best Actress at the Academy Awards about Judy Garland. I didn't see that movie, but so I don't know. But that was one of her like I guess kind of somewhat
More
recent
recent.
performances.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. So this love triangle between Bridget, Daniel Cleaver, who's played by Hugh Grant, and Mark Darcy. Did you who did you find yourself rooting for, and why?
I I think at my age of 32, I was like, oh, I'm rooting for Mark Darcy, but like they're kind of both assholes. Like that's a little bit like,
Okay,
you know,
yeah, I'm
um,
glad.
and
I'm glad you said that. I'm just glad I'm not the only person.
you're not the only
So,
one. No, no, I think, obviously Daniel Cleaver, it's like it's her boss. He's a jerk the whole time. He's literally put in an email sexually harassing her, all the things. And I was like, no, this is all bad. Like there was not a point where I was like, well, maybe it'll work out. Like all of that, I was like, no, like the way that it started and all of that, that was just purely for attention. He's just kind of a sleaze.
yeah,
And Mark Darcy, obviously like every kind of there's like the formula for the rom-com where like the guy that she's going to fall in love with says some rude comments at the beginning and it's kind of
yeah,
miscommunication
yeah.
style, but I thought he was kind of rude too. And like but I guess if it's truly based on Pride and Prejudice, that's how we feel about Mr. Darcy as we're first watching it, and then it kind of grows on us. So like so he did grow on me. Colin Firth's character did grow on me, but yeah, I was forever definitely not rooting for Hugh Grant's character at all at any point.
I'm gonna go back to the actual performances here in a sec, but I have to. Do you have a connection to Pride and Prejudice?
So yes, but I'm the Keira Knightley version,
Okay,
and not the Colin Firth like BBC version.
right,
So
right.
that he has played Mr. Darcy, but I love Pride and Prejudice. It's like something I rewatch at least once a year. But specifically the Keira Knightley version.
Yeah, so I'm not a scholar on Pride and Prejudice. I know I've seen it before, but I feel like I get it mixed up with Sense and Sensibility,
Sure.
like some other Jane Austen type of stuff. So, I guess I feel a little dumb when I say this. When starting this movie, I didn't realize that there was a connection here, that this movie was based on that material.
Mhm.
Is it would you say very loosely based, or
Yeah,
okay.
I would say loosely. Like, I mean, I think there are some key points that do it. So, like, obviously, the name of Darcy is kind of like a nod to it of Mr. Darcy as being
Yeah.
the same character. And it kind of starts off with like they're at a party and then they meet and he says something rude that she overhears. Like, so I'm thinking about that.
Yeah.
And then later on in the movie, the kind of story that they tell about somebody's cheating on a relationship. So like like the Hugh Grant's character stole, or vice versa, Colin Firth's wife, fiance, whatever, that whole storyline that also happens similarly. Like there's like kind of a lie that was like this person actually did it and not this person. So that kind of storyline is also in there, but again, loosely based. So
yeah, that's what. And I read like the publishing company that Cleaver works at, that like there's some, that name is a connection to the book and stuff like that. But yeah, I was, so watching this movie, I didn't know that, but like when Colin Firth's character, when they were like Mark Darcy, I was like, he played a Darcy before. Like that's so like
he's already been a Darcy. Like,
yeah, like I kind of knew that, so it like kind of like bugged me a little bit. And so when I like read it, I kind of felt like, oh, okay, I get it a little bit. So, Hugh Grant is all over this 50 best rom-coms list. So I feel like I might could teach a class now on Hugh Grant, because I've seen him in so many things. But
Sure.
I say that in a loving way, because I mean, I'm not being revolutionary here saying that. I've just been impressed by Hugh Grant's, like his dynamics. Like I know he has his characteristics, but I mean, he really is very different from these different movies. And once again, I was like, oh, he's just immediately when you see him in this movie, and I don't know if it's how he carries himself, but I mean, you're like, oh, he's a sleazeball. Don't trust that guy. Like, and he just conveys that so well. So like, and I also liked Colin Firth in this movie as well. Like I feel like everybody in this movie is doing what they have been given, like completely. I just, like you had just mentioned, I just didn't feel the connection between the characters, not the actors necessarily, but like I just I had a hard time rooting for I mean, you root for Bridget Jones, but rooting for the success of the relationship, you know. So basically when her buddies at the end are like, hey, Bridget, let's go. Like, I'm like, yeah, I think you should do that.
I think you should go with your friends. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's kind of the thing of that's what makes like love triangles in a movie complicated too, because you never truly spend enough time developing relationships well, because it's more of like I see you from afar and I think we should be together, and you're like, that's not real. Like that's not a real relationship. So you're not gonna like stay behind hanging out with your friends because some guy decides to like come back. You know what I mean? Like if I was Bridget Jones' friends, I'd be like, get in the car, we're going. like you're not gonna stay with this man. Like you don't know him. Like you've spent time with him. You hated him not too long ago. So I definitely think that it's hard to kind of develop those characteristics and those kind of strong relationships, because it's almost like not enough time to develop it, especially for like a movie. Like, again, movies, rom-coms back then, an hour and a half of a movie, like you're not like really kind of spending enough time talking about how people are building a relationship or spending time together. It's just like all of that. And also I don't think that like Colin Firth's character and Bridget Jones, I don't think they talked often. Like he was so quiet and reserved that I'm like, did you actually have like a real conversation at any point? Like, unclear.
Yes, very much. So this movie definitely, probably why maybe a lot of people connect to it. It definitely touches on themes of self-improvement and finding one's identity. How do you think these themes are explored throughout the film?
Yeah, so I think that what's nice about I think getting into your 30s is this idea of like, oh gosh, I'm not in my 20s anymore. Like I need to kind of like figure life out. I need to do some things differently. And so I think even when confronted with that, like Bridget Jones is like, oh yeah, like I guess maybe like now's the time that I want to change my career, because I mean, not only because my boss is a jerk, but I'm broken up with now, that cheated on me, all the things. But maybe this isn't the career that I actually enjoy doing. I don't like this work, and finding something she's actually good at, that she actually cares about, is really important. Cutting, drinking, and smoking, and all of those things, like knowing it's not good for you, and like recognizing that your body doesn't handle it the same way as it used to, is another kind of realization at 30. And so, yeah, I think she really kind of goes on this journey. And I think towards the end, like, I love, like, well, I'm sure we'll talk about the music later, but the ways it kind of like adds to, like, as she kind of moving through life and changing things, and using a diary as like, hey, like, this is like where I started and now this is where I am. Then it's really kind of nice to reflect on and kind of look back, like, oh, like, I said these things, or I was this way when I first started this diary after, my time at home, and now I'm like, this is a lot of growth, it's a lot of improvement. And so it's kind of nice to have that to like physically look back at, as in the form of a diary.
Yeah, yeah. Just if people were wondering, you mentioned her kind of going off into journalism. If people think you get elevated that quickly to a on-air TV reporter, especially we're around a lot of younger minds, right?
Sure.
It doesn't quite work like that. Just want to throw that out there. So,
yeah, I was like, she definitely needed to work her way up, but yeah, you know what? Like, well, a little suspension of of belief for a little while.
Yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah.
Whatever career you want, you just jump in. Like, no, you do have to start from the bottom and
Yeah.
move your way up for sure.
The most understandable new boss like ever. Yeah.
Like, doesn't fire you after you mess up big time.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. So I'd be remiss if we just didn't talk about the setting. This film is set in London. How did you feel? Did you like this setting? I don't know if you've ever been over there before, but do you like the British culture? How does the setting become its own character, I guess?
Yeah, I do think that like it's truly like a very British movie, I guess. So I have been to London and I have spent some time there. I'm not like, I was there for like a total of 36 hours. Like, so it's like kind of
wow.
like a maybe a little bit longer, maybe, but like still, like it was in whirlwind. I was just kind of walking around doing there. I was there for a concert. It's a long story, but I love London. I love British culture. I think it's very interesting, and this movie just really felt very British. Like, I think like beyond the accents, it just like kind of like the terms, like the language, like just the way that people kind of refer to things felt very kind of rooted in like British culture. And so yeah, I really like, I love the kind of the views, like countryside, and like the way that they travel and all of that was really nice to kind of just see. It really felt like they were there. But I think I was also reading something about like kind of setting, and people were kind of like analyzing like where certain things were based on like Bridget Jones's apartment is here, and like at the end there's like something that's like far away. And so like I think you obviously with any sort of movie you have to kind of ignore like traffic, like you don't know, or ignore like neighborhoods or transportation, because sometimes they're like, oh, it'll only take you this long to get to this location. You're like, no, that would have been like, you have to get in the car and a bus and then take this. And so
Gotcha.
but I think I really liked kind of the setting and the vibe of it. Like, I think maybe not all jokes landed with me, because I think there's some like truly British humor in it. But I think overall like the setting of it like made sense for, I guess, for what the book was set in, as well as just the vibe of the movie.
Yeah. That was a good point. Yeah, I have no reference point for any kind of setting in London or the United Kingdom. So yeah, I would have no, I take it for whatever I see on screen. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. So yeah, that's a good point. So do you have any favorite scenes from this movie?
I think honestly the favorite one that like is drawing is like when she goes to the party that changes themes, and she shows up in a bunny costume. I mean, I was reading about it because I was like, oh, like as soon as I saw it on screen, I was like, oh, this is like very Legally Blonde. Turns out Legally Blonde like came out around the same time. But obviously it's like showing up with a bunny costume at a place where like you didn't get the memo that the dress code was not that. And so I really just appreciate that she kind of owns that moment too, especially like I think going somewhere where you could be really embarrassed and like shut down, especially with like, your boyfriend just left on because of a work trip, quote unquote, and like all the things. And so you're just like, oh, this is a very vulnerable moment. And instead of like kind of backing down or like grabbing a jacket or something to cover herself up, she's like, oh, well, I missed the memo. Like, let's hang out. And I kind of love that. I think that's just really like fun. And it kind of speaks to Bridget's like comfort with herself in this moment, and how she's kind of just like, oh, well, you know what? It is what it is. I'm going to show up and it'll be fine.
Yeah. I had that scene written down as well. Just that I would say that was definitely one moment I remembered from this movie, like for sure. And yeah, maybe it kind of got blended into Legally Blonde as well. But no, I definitely remember that being a thing, and always making sure you're dressed accordingly, for whatever party. So yeah, definitely a good one. Also, we talked a little bit about the newscast. This is hard for me to say because I do think it's like uber cheesy, but I will admit when she slides down the flagpole and basically
literally shows her ass.
It did make me laugh. I mean, I felt like it was like an easy laugh to get, but they did it well. So.
Oh, I absolutely agree. It definitely was one of the things that I had forgotten about that scene when I watched it, and I was like, oh, that made me kind of laugh out loud.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, our past episode was Something That's Got to Give, and in that movie, I kind of commended Diane Keaton and Jack Nicholson for being actually very vulnerable with their characters and like showing their bodies in unflattering ways and stuff. And similar, I mean, we talked about, I think Renee Zellweger is stunning and cute in this movie, all this stuff, but she's willing to show these like these angles of herself that most actresses probably wouldn't do, and so I think that. Kind of comes through in her connection to the material.
Yeah, very vulnerable, but also in like using your body as humor and like not in like a weird or gross way. It's just very intentional, and I like that about it because it's like I think we can get a lot of like gratuitous like bodies and like nudity as we kind of are looking at things now, and I'm like, no, this is just like fun. Like she's like showing off her body in different ways, and like kind of the way she talks about her body, and like the clothes that she wears and what she chooses to wear in spaces. Like it's she's like we're like with her as she's thinking through the process of all of that. So yeah, I think that's funny and interesting.
Yeah. Another scene I had written down was, and even though I got married in my late 20s, like I could connect, and I know her character's in her early 30s, but I could connect to her because I think especially growing up in the South, like Texas and Oklahoma, the pressures of, you being in a relationship and all that stuff. But when she goes to the dinner with all the coupled friends, I thought that was fantastic. I feel like most people have been in that situation before, but like, I thought that was a really funny moment.
Hey, Bridge, how's your love life?
Oh.
Still going out with that publishing chappie?
No.
Never dip your nib in the office ink.
Right.
You really ought to hurry up and get sprogged up, old girl. Times are running out. Tick-tock.
Yes. Tell me, is it 1 in 4 marriages that end in divorce now, or 1 in 3?
1 in 3.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was sitting there and I was like, oh, been there, like fifth wheel. But like for that, it was like a 12th wheel, like 13th wheel or whatever.
Yeah, she's at the head of the table also,
But I also love, I think one of the funniest things about like when you're single and you're with like people who are married and in relationships, they're like, oh, like, what's like single life like? All this stuff like, oh, I'm like, I could never, I'm so glad, blah, blah, blah. And then kind of like give you like all these like, focus on your singleness in these spaces. So the fact that Bridget Jones is like, what is the divorce rate these days? And I truly was like, tell them, girl, because they're like, oh, that's a good way to shut people up of like, hey, like, don't worry about me and my relationships. Why don't you worry about like one of these relationships is not going to go well.
Yeah. And I mean, it's sad, but it is true. We watched our wedding video not too long ago, like around our anniversary, just to kind of look back in the past. And I won't point out like specifically who, but there are a lot of couples in that wedding video where you're like, yep, nope, they're not together anymore.
Not together anymore. Yeah.
They're not. Yeah. Very much
That's the
related to
reality
that.
of it, right? Like
Mhm.
I was
Yeah.
like, that's just the reality of relationships. But yeah, I think it's like a nice little kind of comeback of like people who tend to, especially married people, focusing on like single people's like relationship status like all the time, especially when it's like invited to a space where there's a lot of married couple and you show up by yourself, right?
Yeah. So I would say this is a very well-written movie, but the quote that definitely stood out to me was when Darcy tells her, I like you very much, just as you are. So just that line does work in the moment. That's probably one of our first times where we actually see a human a little bit behind those robot eyes,
Right.
But that line works just as far as like you can totally see why Bridget kind of starts to swoon over that. But I like how they use it to like, especially her connection with her friends and like how when she's telling them about it, but then it also pays off again, which leads to like, I thought very memorable scene. And I would say when it was the movie kind of hooked me in a little bit more, but when Darcy comes over to her apartment and helps her cook the dinner with the blue soup or whatever, but then at the dinner table when they all mention what he said, I'd like that. I'd like that payoff.
Yeah. Then it like really kind of teases it, and like that's the thing about friendships, and when you're dating somebody or when somebody tells you something, like the immediate like the group text or like the next time you're chatting, you're like, oh my god, he said this about me. And I've absolutely had friends do that and like say that in front of like somebody that I'm dating or seeing right now. They're like, oh, like are you this person, like, or like like whatever like quirky nickname that I have for whoever somebody is dating. Like we definitely use that to our advantage and kind of joke about that. And so it's really funny to see that kind of relationship with her friends kind of play out, and especially like how they just tease her about that in spaces. So yeah, like it's like a very heartwarming and very lovely thing to say to somebody, and also that it can be used as like a little joke later on is truly kind of tying it all together. You said the cooking scene I really loved, just kind of that like the blue soup and kind of the working together to figure out like the options of like I just would have ordered takeout at that point, all the things. But I'm really kind of just like you kind of see in that moment the patience that Darcy kind of has for her that we haven't really seen yet like before. And it's just like he just wants to spend time with her, even if that's making bad soup or figuring out what other things they can do from the random ingredients in the fridge. So
yeah, and it leads to, I would say, a very memorable scene. So Hugh Grant's character kind of like crashes the party, and then they literally come to blows. And I want to get your thoughts on it. So I thought it was a very entertaining scene, like the fight scene between them. But I was also in the same turn, I not that this movie's like seeped in reality, but it was a little. I mean,
it is a movie, Nathan.
I know, but but it is a movie that is kind of actually based in reality a little bit. Like, and up to that point, especially when they go through the window of the restaurant and seemingly walk off with not too many scars or anything. I was kind of like, but it was entertaining. Like I read some fact where it was like, oh, the whole fight was improv between like Hugh Grant and Colin Firth. I was like, no way.
I read that too, and I was like,
no way.
There's no way. They went through a window, like like they might have been like, oh, we want to do this, this, and this, or whatever, but like they definitely didn't improv their way through a fight. That's not how that works.
Yeah.
The magic of Hollywood.
Yeah, but I did like that the fight didn't really. I mean, if anything, it made Bridget, decide she didn't really like either one of them, which I did like. So.
Yeah, I know. She was like, there's nothing more embarrassing than watching two men like fight over something that like it's like neither one of theirs to fight over, right? Like I think that there's some sort of like it's truly like a display of toxic masculinity in those ways of saying like, oh, we're gonna fight over this like person, and we're like, she's like, I'm not with either one of you. Like neither of you own me. This is not like a fight for my honor. Like you there's no reason for all this. And she's like, I'm good. Like I got my friends, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But I did love that they were playing It's Raining Men. I thought that really kind of behind the kind of sideline, I was like, oh yeah, this is hilarious.
Movie Musings.
Bridget often finds herself in awkward social situations. We kind of talked about this with the bunny costume and everything. But can you think of a time like what's your most cringe-worthy moment at a social gathering that can maybe rival one of hers?
Oh God. I think there's so many that I don't even know like how to even start with that. Something that something I can relate to is, her little film or newscast debacle. I was in theater in high school, and I was the crocodile in Peter Pan, and I completely wiped out on stage. It's
Oh.
filmed. I like use it as like a GIF now, but it's something that like my friends regularly bring up to me because they're like, oh, Anne's, when feeling clumsy, like just like kind of falling on stage. But I think that like, there's so many moments where, especially in like social gatherings where I just keep talking and I like whatever is like coming out of my mouth, especially like Bridget Jones says in like the first scene when she's talking to Colin Firth's character, she's just like, oh, like, my New Year's resolution is to give up drinking and smoking, as she's drinking and smoking, and like, oh, I guess like, and she just keeps talking. And so I think that truly that is something that I always do, because I don't like silence. I don't like when people aren't talking. And so I'll just fill the silence with whatever is up in my head, which is never really great. So yeah, I think that, out of embarrassing moments, like I have a handful of them. I think that Bridget Jones really takes her embarrassing moments with stride, which is something that I maybe don't do as well of, but I think I'm a little bit like, oh my God, I cannot believe I just said that. But as life goes, we always kind of replay those moments in our head, or they pop up and you're like, oh, I'm still embarrassed like 10, 15 years later. So
Hayden, who's in second grade, she said she came up with this by herself. I don't know if she did or not, but she doesn't really like silence, and it's so cute. Like I can't do it justice, but whenever it's just kind of quiet in the car or whatever, she'll always go, silence. We must all clap. So that's what made me think
she's
of
like,
it.
yeah, she's like, yeah. I'm like, you know what? I don't like silence, so we're gonna make it. Yeah, I just can't stand it. So.
Yeah, and so she's done it enough now. When she does it, we all just kind of clap along with her.
Exactly.
So Bridget has a tendency in this movie to overthink things and spiral into self-doubt. Is there something silly that you overanalyze, or something in the past that you've gotten in this frame of mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like sort of spiraling is something that I think I do regularly. Most of the stuff I spiral about recently though is just Taylor Swift. Like that's like I'm like deep in like conspiracy theories and all the things of like that's what I spiral about. But
Okay.
I think that that's like that's like literally my immediate thought. I'm like, oh, this. But I think that like any sort of interaction, I sometimes I get so embarrassed, like on thinking back to it of like, oh, like, of this guy that I liked in college that was just like rode around on a freaking Razor scooter. Like, that's so embarrassing for me, like to even be interested in somebody like that. And then like, hopefully he's not ever listening to this. So that's hilarious. But like, there's just so many things that like, I think that we all, like, as just like human beings, we live lives of like, I maybe should have said things differently, or whatever I practiced in the shower to say in this conversation didn't turn out like I thought it was going to be. And so we're kind of like thinking through like, oh, like maybe I should have said it this way. But I try to kind of like also the same way that Bridget does, like even push through those moments and just like not dwell on them too much. Like spiraling definitely is like hard. It's like writing about it, thinking about it, like any way you kind of journal or like vent to friends about like, oh my God, I just made this stupid mistake, or I did something so embarrassing, or like I'm freaking out about X, Y, and Z. It's always nice to have people to bounce that off of. And if all else fails, like write it down, use a diary like she does, right?
Yeah. I've never really have journaled or kept anything like that. I definitely can see how it could be therapeutic for sure.
Yeah, I think one of those things that's like I've actually found diaries from like years and years ago, like in recent years, like I've gone through some of my like childhood stuff, and like some of that stuff is so cringe. Like looking back at it, I'm like, oh, like I cannot believe I wrote that. Like that's such a weird thing to say, or like why was I like so worried about this person like not passing me a note or something like that? It's something so trivial, but I think it's nice to kind of look back and be like, wow, like that's something that I was so worried about when I was in middle school, high school, and now I'm worried about like, did I do my taxes right? Or like, you know what I mean? Like, there's just so many like bigger and things that I'm worried about. But yeah, so I think for me, the journaling is something that I like kind of keep up with every once in a while. Like I use a planner that has like sort of like a reflection piece at the end of every month. So I try to use that as part of that process. And so it's like, not that I'm keeping everything up here, but I'm just like writing it down or like putting it in my notes app on my phone, which is definitely full of a lot of things, like of just thoughts and feelings about stuff. So
no, that's very commendable. I'm thinking now, like, I probably avoid doing such things. Instead, I create like a podcast to, you know, like, so I don't self-reflect too much.
This is like journaling, right? Like
sort of. So you kind of set yourself up for this one, but I promise I had this written down for you because I knew you had a little bit of a acting background. But can you speak in a British accent?
Oh, absolutely not. Like it's not even that I cannot, like, I'm not good. Like, it's not that I'm not good. Like, I'm just like not good at it. But the only thing I can think of when I think of like talking in a British accent is Easy A. When Emma Stone's like, to say that was a, you know, loose interpretation is a bit of an understatement, governor. Like, that's all I can think of when I think of a British accent. And so I've attempted accents before, like, you know, sometimes going to bars with friends or whatever. I've been like, oh, like I'll just I'll pretend like I'm this person or like give a different name. But every time I'm like, oh, hello, like it never sounds natural. Like I was not good. My dialect class did not go well. So like I never had to use that in my acting background. And so maybe that's a new hobby maybe I'll pick up in my new year. Like I've always wanted to, and I like tend to pick up the accents of people that I'm around. And so like I can kind of feel sometimes like when I'm with my mom, my like Southern accent gets a lot deeper, like when I'm with different people. And so I think I'm trying to think of like when I was in London, did I just like kind of go around and be like, oh, hello, like, you know, like, oh, how are you? Or like, you all right? Like whatever, like they say. And so but I'm just not very good at it.
Rom-Com Rankings.
The first category is the romantic chemistry between the leads. So basically, I guess you could take. I kind of see this. I mean, spoiler here. If you're this far into listening to this conversation, then you're worried about spoilers about Bridget Jones, but she ends up with Darcy here in this movie. So this is kind of where I took it because it's ultimately who. I mean, we're led to believe that Cleaver is like not the guy she's supposed to be with. Sure. Even though you even alluded to it, and I've seen the posters, I'm like, oh, they bring him back. But anyway, so how would you rate this chemistry between Bridget?
I feel like I want to give it a 3. Okay. Because I feel like it's a good middle of the road. There are some really tender and like soft moments between her and Mr. Darcy. I say Mark Darcy. Well, you know, just that's very. I'm Pride and Prejudice is on the brain. Yeah. But I think that there's, you know, we don't get enough kind of moments, and like because there's, you know, vying for the attention of two people, we don't get that like full storyline from start to finish. Like, yeah, he's always there, but like she's very much focused on, you know, Hugh Grant's character for most of the movie, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's here, and then he's actually kind of nice, and then okay, now we're together. Like it just felt kind of rushed and maybe not as strong.
Yeah. So I'm going to be a little harsh with my rankings for this movie. And it's not, I don't think, a true indication of the quality of the movie, because I definitely don't think this is the worst movie on the 50 best rom-coms list. But I gave it a 1. I just didn't.
Speak your truth, Nathan.
I just did not see them together at all. And I mean, I don't know. And I know opposites attract. And so, but this just you
do they like?
I mean, you mentioned like, I mean, they just had not had the conversations to even elicit the chemistry, and you know, I don't know, I just didn't really buy it. And I know he says that sweet thing, but then I you know, and
he's like in a relationship most of the movie too. So like he's in a different relationship. Yeah, so he didn't really resolve that at all. But like, yeah, I think that's hard to like also believe like the like true honestness of his character when he's like literally with somebody else. Like we're so like, oh, he's just a friend, you know, until like the last second.
Yeah. So this second category is the best friends. Usually there's a best friend component, and I think definitely Bridget has her trio of friends here. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. I love the Friends, though I truly wanted more of the Friends.
Yes,
I don't
I
think
would agree.
enough. I don't think we got to truly understand each of their personalities as well. They just kind of like come as a trio, and like the one like man that's in the group was like yes, like he was kind of given some sort of side storyline, but not really. And so honestly, I wanted more of them. So I'm gonna give it a 2 just because I think there could have been a lot more Friends. But I think that if we explore that a little bit better, then they could be higher.
Yeah, man, you're being a little more harsh than I am.
We're gonna have opposite rankings.
Yeah, so I gave them a 3 because you said it perfectly. I would have loved to see more of them. And I want to say the Shazir. I honestly I don't even remember when they said their names, but Jude and Tom are the others. I don't remember when they said their names in the movie actually, but I did think very very supportive, very funny. Definitely are loyal to Bridget, and I think this is another. And I know there are more writers than Richard Curtis, so I'm kind of lumping them all into one here. But it's something I feel like he's always done really well as a writer. Everything from Poor Weddings and a Funeral to, especially in Notting Hill, the supporting characters usually really stand out, and I think they do here. But like you said, yeah, maybe a little bit more depth to them, and they would have been a little bit more memorable, so yeah.
Yeah.
But okay, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but the third category is the soundtrack. Did you get a chance to listen to it?
Yeah, I listened through on Spotify from what you sent. And I like the soundtrack. I think it's very of the times again, like
Yes.
the 2000s. Like there are some songs that I'm like, yep, this takes me back to that time frame, like very kind of moody, but also I like that a lot of the songs related directly to the movie, like that they were very intentionally either
Yes.
picked. I don't know if like any songs were written for the movie, but like regardless, they seemed very intentionally picked and chosen for how the flow of the movie would go, and I think that worked really nicely.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Even when I was listening to it, exactly, definitely of the times. Like I was like, yes, this just the production value and all that was very like brought me back to college quite a bit. This initial, like many soundtracks, it doesn't have all the songs that are in the
Sure.
actual movie, but I was as I was listening, I was like, how basically there's the majority of the music is from females,
Yeah.
at least like the singers. There's a couple from like Robbie Williams does the song and stuff.
Sure.
So I thought that was interesting. So there's Sheryl Crow's on here, and a lot of the well-known songs you mentioned, it's Raining Men, are covers. All by Myself is a cover as well by these other artists and stuff like that. And the Raining Men actually became a hit for Jerry Hollowell, and she was one of the Spice Girls, I think, right?
Yeah.
But it became like her fourth consecutive #1 hit single on the UK singles chart after this movie.
British people loved this movie. They loved this movie.
Yeah, they are all in for it. So but saying that, like listening through it, it's like, yes, I recognize I'm Every Woman, definitely All by Myself. And like you said, it plays very much to the moments of the film. As far as the soundtrack itself, I gave it 2.5. I thought it was okay. I don't think I would ever really go back to it.
Yeah, I'll probably give it a 3 as like close enough as well, because like I think that obviously there's some standout moments, but it's not necessarily a soundtrack that you're gonna like, I'm gonna go back and listen to it so I can like feel the same thing I felt. Like there are soundtracks that I definitely feel like that with movies, but this one I think it was good. I think obviously the All by Myself was so incredibly relatable. I like going back to like favorite scenes, that was one of my favorites, because like every single girl in their 20s or 30s has done that, of just like, I'm gonna put on the song that makes me feel my feels, and we're just gonna cry it out as we're laying on the couch and doing whatever. So
I'm super interested to see what you think about this. So the fourth category is the chase scene or the declaration of love. I want to let you talk about this. I think definitely the end of this movie has a chase scene in it. So what are your feelings? Like, how would you rank this category? Tell me a little bit of your thoughts.
So I'll preface this with saying, like, one of my least favorite tropes in like any sort of rom-com movies is the miscommunication trope.
Yes.
Like, and I recognize that that's like the staple of a lot of rom-coms, but I get so mad. I'm like, you couldn't have left a note. You could have told her where she were going. So like, the fact that he like is reading her diary and the audience is to believe that, he's like done with her now after reading like 2 pages. First of all, invasion of privacy. Second of all, like you didn't even give her an opportunity to explain herself. So the audience is to believe that he's leaving. And then she's yelling out the window saying like, Mark, come back. Like, and he just keeps walking. It's an empty street. He can hear her. So also, yeah, so all that like to say, like, she goes running after him in just her underwear and a sweater and tennis shoes. One thing about me, I have very strong rules. Like I don't run for fun. I don't run. If you see me running, you should also run too. I'm never running for a man. Absolutely not. So so I actually rank this, for me, I'm like, I know it's a rom-com and it's like the whole point is to get to this end, but like, and I think it's cutesy and funny and like, oh, like, you find out he's just going to get her a new diary and that's adorable. But I'm going to give it a 2 because you know what? She could have just like waited and been like, okay, I guess if he doesn't want me, that's fine. Like, girl, you don't need him. Like he's getting you a gift, so I guess it's nice, but like you don't need him.
Yeah, we are in lockstep completely with this. So, and this is where like I would say the movie kind of ultimately kind of lost me because I had mentioned like the dinner scene. I got a little bit more invested into like what was going to happen with them, and then like first off, I didn't remember how the movie ended, and so when he just walks out, exactly what you said, I was like, what in the world? Like what
are you doing?
I was just like really I was completely bugged. I was like, and this is like what sets him off, And so now, but this is like this movie, what it does to me, her just having ultimately decide to go after him, just dressed in what she's dressed, I thought was great. I thought that was like really funny. Like, yes, this is a good moment. And so kind of pulls me back in. But when she catches up to him and the fact that he has gone however far down the street to the store that happens to be open at what I would assume is a late night to buy I was just like, this moment for me was really like a roll my eyes, like, oh gosh, like I didn't like it at all. So, and I was like, oh, this is, and so, it gets the humor part of like, once again, it gets Bridget right, like really well, but like the other situations, just not so much. And I gave it 2 solely because it would have been one that I did laugh at her just having to run out like that. It was very funny, but I'm glad you and I should have thought about the invasion of privacy aspect. That's funny that you said that.
So reading your diary, like what do you mean?
I can see him going, especially as a lawyer, right? Like,
right.
Know better.
You should know better.
But okay, so the last category, rewatchability. How would you rank this?
I would say that if people are going to rewatch it, they're probably going to rewatch it at the time when the newest one is about to come out. So like, I think it's a movie that you can like put on the background if you're just like wanting something to kind of give you a giggle, give you a laugh, like, but I would maybe just give it, let's say 2.5. Like, it's not something that I'm going to like necessarily seek out to watch, but like if it was playing, like if I'm at a hotel and it was playing on TV, I maybe wouldn't change the channel. And as if we're anticipating a 4th movie, then I'll definitely probably go back and watch it yet again. Plus the second and third, which the second one I'm not sure if I've seen, but I still think I have, but unclear.
No, I agree with you as well. I would give it 2.5. But I would say, if it's a movie that people haven't seen before, like I think they should watch it. I think it's
absolutely
definitely a moment in time. But like I said, it doesn't even really like I don't have to see this again anytime soon, nor has it inspired me to watch the sequels at all.
Right.
So versus like we did the Best Man. Have you seen that movie?
I don't think so.
But anyway, that was a movie I hadn't seen before this list. Really liked it a lot. Once again, not a perfect movie, but like it made me want to watch The Best Man Holiday and like the other things after it. And so this movie just didn't do that for me. But all that said, I mean, we definitely have pinpointed that the British folks really enjoy this movie a lot. But what do you think has contributed to its enduring popularity? Because even like, I mean, I jokingly said, like, I sent that text to you about the fourth, movie being made. But I mean,
Yeah.
I got that notification from like all the major news sources. So Bridget Jones
Right.
is like a thing. Like,
Truly, she's beloved.
Yeah. So why do you think that's the case?
I think a lot of it probably has to do with the fact that it started as a book, right? Like, I think that there is like a very new, not even new, but like a very like kind of tie of people like that are reading, because like that's like one of my favorite genre of books to read is books that are turned into media of some sort, because then I can like compare and contrast. I
Yeah.
can kind of see like fan casts, all this stuff. And so I think the book was so beloved that like because the movie held up to the book standards, that they're like, okay, well, like then it's going to keep doing that, right? It's going to keep giving me what I wanted out of these books. I'm actually not sure if like the sequel and all of that is part of the book series as well. Like, I don't know if that's like, I haven't actually read the book. But if that's the case, I think that maybe that's like what's kept it enduring, of people are like, oh, I want to see, the movie. I think I've in reading stuff about it, I think that the second and third did better in the UK than it did in America. And I think that truly is probably kind of just dependent on it's very British culture, and like maybe, we just aren't like maybe understanding all the jokes or like kind of the nuances of it, or even just like the setting doesn't look like as familiar as like, I love watching shows where I'm like, oh, like this is from like set in this location, or set, even in Oklahoma where we are. It's kind of fun to see movies like that. And so I'm sure that's also how British people feel about films that are especially like focused on and set in London. So
No, completely agree. Yeah. And I was just thinking, for some reason, as you were talking, it is fascinating how we, grab onto these characters that aren't real. So like for some whatever reason, never thought I'd make this connection between Bridget Jones and Rocky Balboa. But I was just sitting there thinking, I was like, there is a statue of Rocky in Philadelphia that people like go see. And yes, Sylvester Stallone is a real person who played this character, but people like, it's just kind of fascinating that like, people just as a whole, collectively elevate these characters that aren't real. But it's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree.
Yeah, but part of the reason why, I love movies and characters and all the things,
Recommendations.
Is there anything you've been watching or reading or listening to that you've been telling people about? I mean, isn't the Taylor Swift new album coming out like
Friday? Yeah.
Friday. Okay.
Yeah.
Tuesday used to be the big album release day. Has that changed, I guess?
I think it's changed to Fridays. I think people, because like they want to drop music video and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's, like, Friday. I think honestly, like Spotify has created like some of that, like New Music Friday, and so every Friday you're like listening to something new, and so I think that's it. So I will definitely be staying up. So yeah, I'm definitely always engaging in Taylor Swift content. Also, I've actually started watching the series One Day. So it's also based on a book. But I had originally hauled off on watching the series because I watched the movie with Anne Hathaway and Jim Sturgis, and that movie is probably in my top 5 like hardest cries I've ever had.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, literally, I was like, oh, like people were like showing clips on TikTok and like reactions of like people like sobbing, dry heaving. And I was like, is this the same thing? And so I like was like looking it up, and I was like, oh, like I was like, some of y'all didn't see the Anne Hathaway movie, otherwise you wouldn't even started the series, because it's like that devastating. And so, but knowing who I am as a person, I don't like feeling left out of the conversation, and so I'm like, I'm gonna watch it. So I'm about, I think, 9 episodes of 14 in, and I like know what's coming, but like I'm still gonna cry a lot.
Well, I won't ruin anything because Whitney and I did watch the series and we finished it. So we can talk like just whenever we run into each other about it and stuff like that. So I believe Whitney read the book like when it came out, and we definitely saw the movie. It's been a long time since we've seen the movie.
Yeah.
And so the Netflix series, like I wouldn't say really enjoyed it, but I thought it was a good show, especially like a newer show that's come out that I liked the length of the episodes, and I like the concept and stuff. But no, that's definitely a good recommendation. But just know if you're watching it, I mean, it's heavy romance drama, not romance comedy.
Yeah, I know. It's like kind of like the thing of like, yeah, like you should, beware. And I was like, it's funny because I think I had watched the movie, the Anne Hathaway movie. I had rewatched it during COVID because I was going through like DVDs that I had and I was trying to go through the alphabet and like I only had like a couple movies and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
one day I haven't seen this in a while. I can't remember what it's about. And then as it's approaching, I won't spoil it, but like as it's approaching a really devastating scene, I was like, oh no. And I was like, I was too far gone. I had to finish it and it was just not good. But yeah, I just really like Leo Woodall. I think is a up and coming actor in like the series, and so like he was in White Lotus, and so I'm excited to see kind of like how people interpret kind of new things. I feel like it's maybe a little too soon to have done something that like I feel like the Anne Hathaway movie was like what 2005 maybe, I don't know. Oh, it's 2011.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But still, like I mean that's like a solid, I guess, 13 years to kind of do that. So wow.
Yeah. I know. Time flies. So my recommendation, it's kind of I'm really inspiring people here. It's kind of a tepid recommendation, but it's Elsbeth on CBS. And so we were really big fans of The Good Wife when it was on CBS. And then it's kind of spin off The Good Fight, which predominantly aired on Paramount Plus, and kind of because it was streaming, kind of got to go into territory that the original show wasn't able to, or whatever. And so this is based on a character from those series, and it's in a new location, but it's got the same style. And why it's a little different. The Good Fight and The Good Wife were definitely legal dramas, but and they were kind of had each episode was its own episode, but there was definitely a big through line. This show is more like it's like in an inverted detective story format. And so like we don't really watch procedurals like this. Like we're not like a CSI or NCIS or that type of thing. And so, but we liked Elsbeth, the character, so much. And the creators here, they always do a great job with the world. I mean, they have really good actors. It's very similar to like Poker Face. Like each episode features like a very recognizable actor and stuff like that. And so anyway, it's kind of a good show I guess really throw on and like kind of relax your brain. But I don't watch a whole lot of like crime stuff, but this whole format of basically, and this isn't ruining anything, showing the murder at the beginning of the episode and then like coming to find out how she, solves it, doesn't really do it for me. It completely kind of takes the fun of it out for me. But all that said, I feel like generally most people enjoy it. And if you like, I feel like it's maybe a little headier than other procedurals out there. So that's why I'm recommending it. So anyway, and so I asked Whitney, I was like, is this something we keep on watching? And she's like, it's kind of fun to have if we don't have anything else to watch. And I was like, yeah, that's a good way.
That's a good way to watch it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
I know it's like tough to like watch like new stuff. Like I'm very much like a person like you said, procedurals. I watch Law and Order SVU and Criminal Minds like regularly. Like I'll just put on a season because I've seen all the episodes, and so like I don't have to pay that much attention. But I love those kind of crime shows. But it's interesting because like with Law and Order SVU, kind of there's some storylines that have like a through line throughout, like similar like you were talking about. But I wanted to watch the spinoff of Organized Crime, but that one is like something you have to pay more attention to because the through line is very like it's a longer kind of goes through the whole season rather than like a couple episode arc kind of situation. And so but I was like, I'll definitely put that on my list because you never know when you just need something. I haven't watched The Good Wife or The Good Fight, but like what? What's a new show,
Yeah. Did you say you hadn't seen The Good Wife or The Good Fight?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
Also recommend.
If you can, I absolutely love those shows. Like you should, and it helps if you dove into The Good Fight before The Good Wife. They are like two separate things. There is some like kind of past knowledge that helps a little bit, but it's kind of a standalone thing. So, but I think you would like it a lot actually. So, cool. Thank you so much for doing this. So,
thanks for having me.
I don't quite know the time code on this thing. We've probably talked about this movie more than most people have before, but it's so easy to talk to you about this stuff. So I'm glad we can like basically translate our run-ins on campus and into this
Right.
format a little bit. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, if people ever see us talking on campus and they're wondering what we're talking about work so much, we're not. We're
not. We're never talking about work. We're talking about movies all the time.
Yeah. So so I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I'm really trying to grow our audience this year. That's a big goal of mine.
Right.
So Anne, I want you right now, think of somebody that you think would enjoy this podcast. You got that person in your mind?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want you to do that. I want you to tell them about the podcast. So everybody that's listening right now, same exercise. There has to be one person that loves movies that doesn't know about this podcast. And it just takes a moment, right? To moviesarelife.com. Just send them the link. That's all. Simple text. That's all you have to do.
That's all you got to do. Send it away.
Here's a good way to end this podcast. How would you sign off your journal entry? Do you sign Anne at the end?
Oh, I would say XOXO Gossip Girl. That's how I would sign it off.
There we go. That's perfect. All right. Well, take care.
You too. See you later.